This is our third day and our first trip to the New Testament so far. We're going to be in the Gospel of Mark, which is the shortest of the four Gospels and honestly the easiest to read of the four. If you're new to the Bible, Gospel of Mark is a great place to start. The book is fast-paced and action-packed. We're going to be in a story today that honestly needs a full sermon to be able to fully explore, but I'm going to restrain myself to just a few minutes. So Mark chapter 5, we're going to read the story of the woman who had an issue of blood. Now, if you remember this story, you remember that this particular encounter with Jesus is sandwiched between another story that's already in progress. A man named Jairus, who is a synagogue leader, comes to Jesus and tells him that his daughter is dying, and he wants Jesus to come to his home so that he'll heal her. So Jesus agrees, and he goes on his way to Jairus' home, but he's interrupted along the way, and that's the story that we're going to read. So Mark chapter 5, starting in verse 24. A large crowd followed and pressed around him, and a woman was there who had been subject to bleeding for 12 years. Her specific illness is not just painful and embarrassing, it also made her unclean. In Jewish culture, there were certain things based on laws in the Old Testament that made you ritually unclean. Touching something dead, for example. Now, these things weren't sinful inherently. It was just a symbolic system set up to emphasize God's holiness. But a really rich Bible study for another time. Point being, there are side effects to being ritually unclean. One is you can't be around other people. You are contagious, so to speak. If you touch somebody who is clean, they now become unclean like you. The second thing, though, is that you also can't participate in religious rituals. So the cultural message that was sent was that you were not in good standing with God until you were made clean and could come to the temple again. To come to God while unclean was to defile his space. So now, imagine this woman's situation. I mean, there are many of us who are getting stir crazy after just 1 week of social distancing and isolation. This woman has been practicing social distancing for 12 years. And it gets worse. We read she had suffered a great deal under the care of many doctors and had spent all she had, yet instead of getting better, she grew worse. So it's not just that her disease is causing her to suffer. Her treatments, the very things that are supposed to cure her, are causing her to suffer even more. And so when she heard about Jesus, she came up behind him in the crowd and touched his cloak because she thought, if I just touch his clothes, I will be healed. She's very confident about this strategy, but where is she getting this idea from? Jesus had never healed anyone this way before, but that's the point. You see, she isn't just thinking to herself, oh, I heard about this one guy who was lowered down through a roof and then Jesus healed him. So I need to get myself lowered down through a roof because that's the trick to getting healed. No, she isn't putting her faith in a process. She's putting her faith in a person. And it's the same for us today. If we're wanting an answer to prayer, it would be silly to look at someone else's answered prayer and then try to copy everything that person did in their prayer life, as if there was something magical in that particular method that God responded to. And so as she does this, verse 29, immediately her bleeding stopped, and she felt in her body that she was freed from her suffering. Now think about it. What should happen here? An unclean woman touches Jesus' clothes. What should happen? Her uncleanness should spread to Jesus. But the opposite actually happens. Jesus' holiness makes her clean. And we see this again and again in the Gospels. You can't make Jesus dirty. He can only make you clean. Now, if the story stopped right here, all would be good, right? I mean, the lady was healed miraculously. Hooray! But there's more to the story because Jesus makes everyone in this crowd going to Jairus' home stop. At once, Jesus realized that power had gone out from him. He turned around in the crowd and asked, "Who touched my clothes?" You see the people crowding against you," his disciples answered, "and yet you ask, 'Who touched me?'" But Jesus kept looking around to see who had done it. What Jesus is doing is odd for a couple reasons. Firstly, he's headed somewhere, right? There's a girl dying, and Jesus is concerned about who touched him? There are more important things at stake, Jesus. Keep moving. But this is also weird because this woman clearly doesn't want attention, and Jesus is forcing her into the spotlight. Why? That's rude. I mean, respect the poor introvert. But here's what's beautiful. Jesus could keep going. This lady has been healed. She got what she wanted. But this isn't enough for Jesus. He loves her too much to just give her a quick fix and send her on her way. He wants much more for her than just physical healing. Jesus reveals a God who isn't just a cosmic vending machine to hand out magical fixes for our problems. Jesus reveals a God who wants to know you and be known by you. This God is not cold and distant and aloof. This God is scanning the crowd, looking for anyone who will come to him. And this God, he has time for really important, influential people like Jairus. And he also has time for seemingly insignificant, ritually unclean, socially outcast people like this woman. All are worthy of Jesus' time. And here comes my favorite part of this story. Then the woman, knowing what had happened to her, came and fell at his feet, and trembling with fear, she told him the whole truth. Jesus said to her, "Daughter, your faith has healed you. Go in peace and be freed from your suffering." Wow. This verse is where I want to land the plane. I highlighted 4 things here. Look at each of them. Firstly, daughter. This is the only person that Jesus ever calls daughter. So here is someone who had no sense of community for 12 years, who is now lovingly embraced into the family of God. Second thing there, your faith. Jesus says, it wasn't touching my robe that was the secret trick to getting you healed. It was your faith that did that. You, a woman who hasn't been able to participate in temple services for over a decade, your faith matters. Your faith is mighty. Third thing there, go in peace. We read that she comes to Jesus fearful, scared of what he might do now that he knows who she is and what she's done. But Jesus says, don't be afraid. You are healed and loved and seen. And lastly there, be freed. Your burden is gone. You are healed. You can walk in new life. And you'll notice here, each of these 4 things represents a different kind of healing. Daughter, relational healing. Your faith, spiritual healing. Go in peace, emotional healing. And be freed, physical healing. So my question for you today is this. Which of these 4 phrases do you need to hear from Jesus today? Daughter, Maybe you need to hear that you aren't just a face in the crowd. Maybe you need to feel seen by God, to know that He loves you like a son or a daughter. Your faith, maybe your spiritual life is plagued by doubt and you feel like you have nothing to offer God. And maybe what you need is assurance that your faith matters. And let me tell you, if your faith is in the right person, then that faith, no matter how small, is mighty. Go in peace. Maybe what you need now most is peace. Something in your life or in the world around you has made you uneasy or worried, ashamed, doubtful. And what you need most is a sense of calm in your heart and in your mind. Or maybe it's be freed. Maybe you need freedom from something that you have no control over, a bad situation, a sickness, something in your past. Maybe you need freedom from a mess of your own making. Whichever it is, Jesus is the person to go to. I don't know which of these things resonates with you the most. Maybe it's more than one of them. But I want to invite you, when this video ends, to just take a few moments and talk with Jesus about one of these things. What is it that you want to ask of Him? Jesus sees you, He cares about you, and He is mighty. That wraps up for today our thought. I'm going to spin the randomizer wheel. It's not a wheel, but it's a button. Fun. All right, what we're going to look at tomorrow is the book of Ezekiel. Back in the thick of the Old Testament. All right, God bless. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.